Welcome to Syncreate, a show where we explore the intersections between creativity, psychology, and spirituality. Our goal is to demystify the creative process and expand the boundaries of what it means to be creative. I'm Melinda Rothaus, and I help individuals and organizations bring their creative dreams and visions to life. And just before we get started today, I wanted to let you all know that we are on Patreon. So if you're enjoying the show and you want to help us grow and support the effort, this is kind of my personal gift to the world. We don't run commercials or anything like that. So if you'd like to support us, find us on Patreon. So today, what we're doing is a little bit different than anything we've done before on the show. We have three wonderful guests today, whom I'll introduce in just a moment. And, this episode is much more personal to me. I'm going to talk a lot more about my personal journey related to one aspect of my own creativity and how each of you have so amazingly supported me in this journey. To kind of just give you some context here. So creativity is like what I live and breathe. It's what I'm all about. And for years, I struggled with a condition called adenomyosis, which is a gynecological condition that affects your uterus and makes it enlarged. I had several fibroids, painful periods most of my life, a lot of discomfort. And it was suggested to me some years ago that the only cure for this condition was a hysterectomy. And, I was very hesitant to do surgery for several reasons. Just number one, the bodily integrity. I felt like I wanted to keep myself intact on a physical level. But also, I'm a big believer in sort of the energy of creativity, how creativity lives in our body, how it's connected to our life force energy, our sexuality. In the chakra system, the second chakra, that pelvic space is connected to our creativity. So my biggest fear, which wasn't a rational fear, but it was a visceral fear, like I could feel it in my body, was that if I lost my womb, I would lose my creativity. And I remember many tears, probably with each of you, about that. So what I discovered along the way in talking with each of you and a number of other women is that the more I started to share my story, the more I started to hear all these other people's stories and their struggles and their experience. Oh, I had to do that. Oh, yeah, that happened to me. And, each story is unique, but there's such a commonality. And then I started to think, why is this a taboo topic? We're in the 21st century. Why don't we have these conversations more? And so I thought, let's have the conversation here.
Yay.
Yeah. So briefly, to introduce each of you, across from me, we have Marie Commisso.
Hi.
Hi. Massage therapist and healer extraordinaire, originally from upstate New York, now living in the Austin area in Wimberley, Texas. And definitely want to hear more of your journey as we go on today.
Absolutely.
Yes. And then next to Marie, we have Leah Shadwick. She's an acupuncturist practicing alchemical acupuncture and transformative healing, originally from New York City. And you came here to Austin to study acupuncture at the Academy of Oriental Medicine. And you've been here ever since.
I was going to say, never left.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then we have Thais, physical therapist and Feldenkrais practitioner. And you're originally from Brazil and now in Austin for a number of years. So I consider y'all part of my core healing and wellness team.
Thank you.
I've been working with each of you for a while now, and particularly once I made the decision to go ahead and have this surgery, y'all have been incredibly helpful and supportive to me in sharing your own experiences and your wisdom, in working with clients and patients. And it's just been really such a blessing to me to have each of you. So I want to hear a little bit more about each of your kind of relationship to this topic around creativity, women's health, the body, the sacred feminine, sexuality, all of these things, which I think are really interconnected. So I want to start with Leah because I've known you the longest and I've been working with you the longest. And just, tell us a little bit more about, your connection to this topic.
Well, I think my connection to this topic is just my own personal, very long journey of hormonal roller coaster ever since I can remember. I feel like growing up, I just don't ever remember having a great period or cycle or even relationship to my cycle. And even in my 20s, like painful periods and bad PMS. And then, when I just tried to have my son and through my fertility, I found out through one of my teachers who was an acupuncturist and Chinese medical practitioner through basal body temperature that I had these fibroids. And I was like, how come a gynecologist never told me about these fibroids? I mean, I had the symptoms. I had painful periods. I had PMS. I had heavy bleeding, like bleeding through my pants, And once I discovered that, I kind of started this journey for me about like, how am I going to heal these fibroids so that I could birth my son? And I did acupuncture and herbs and nutrition and lots of acupuncture and healing and talk therapy. I mean, all the healing modalities. And it took me about a year, and I finally did get pregnant with him. And I actually, in the midst of that experience, had a very spiritual experience because it was hard for me to get pregnant. It took about a year, and I was like, I have all these tools. How come I can't get pregnant? I don't understand what's happening. And I remember going to a fertility doctor, and she was like, oh, these fibroids, like, you're not going to be able to get pregnant. And within my family, my greatest aunt is, she's a healer, but she didn't actually like practice healing, just within her spirituality in Puerto Rico. And she was just known within her community for doing healing with hands. And my mom was saying, she was like, I think we have to go visit your aunt in Florida and let's just go see her. She was like, she must have been like 99, if not over 100, like in this nursing home, like not talking. She couldn't really talk, but so we gathered there with my family, like talk about community, right? Yeah. We gathered there, we all held hands. She put her hands on my belly. She like prayed to herself, and I got pregnant right after that.
That is incredible.
It's
so real. You can't deny it.
Yeah, it was a really incredible experience. And I think just even being there with my family and community and belief and support, when so many people are like, well, these fibroids are in the way, like it's not going to be, it's not going to happen. And I'm trying to be brief, but, fast forward, the fibroids grew through my pregnancy and they were in the way, and I had to have a scheduled C-section, and that recovery was not fun. And I honestly was like, I don't know if I could have another one after that experience. But, they kind of calmed down, and now they've come back as I'm more in this perimenopausal time. And, I think I feel a little fatigued by it because I'm like, I can't believe I have to go through this process again. But it is making me think about, like, perimenopausally, like, what am I trying to birth next?
Yes.
In my own creativity. What is trying to come through? What am I blocking? How is that related to my feelings, my emotions, my spirituality? who I am and what I need to be in this kind of next phase of my life. So, yeah.
It's beautiful. And I know there's so much more with your healing work with your, clients and patients. And hopefully we'll get to hear
a little bit more about that
as well.
Yeah, it's beautiful being able to work with women and see them on their healing journey. And it's amazing, even working with women's health, it's like once you start to dive in, everyone has a story or a trauma or an experience linked to their reproductive system.
Yeah. So I want to move next to Marie.
Okay.
And you and I connected a few years ago through a mutual friend and just really hit it off. And I started coming to see you for massage and energy work. And you really helped me through a major transition time in my life a couple years ago. And we've just become great friends. Yes. And so, one of the things that really sticks out to me when I was contemplating the surgery, that you had been through it. And so you were really able to help me kind of see what the process might be like. And your story is a bit different from mine. And love to hear, what you want to share about that. But it was really helpful, to me to have somebody so close who had gone through it and is now thriving and doing wonderfully well. So
thank you. It is a process.
It is.
And everyone's different.
It's not
for sure.
easy.
Yeah.
So what's your connection here?
Yeah. It's hard to know where to start because there are so many layers to it, because there's the physical portion, the emotional portion, and then the spiritual connection to all of it. And I could relate to so many things that you were saying. So even already it feels healing to be here. So thank you.
Good.
Yes. Because, I've physically healed, but there are definitely still elements that aren't, completely healed. So yeah, thank you. So part of the whole journey for me was I ended up having to have an emergency hysterectomy. I had fibroids in my uterus, 3 of them. One, the legs ended up growing into the artery, and I essentially was bleeding out and in and everywhere. And so I was emergently taken into the hospital. And the next day, so we were trying to control it as much as possible, but the next day, and the first thing in the morning, I ended up having a hysterectomy. And at that time, or by that time, I had been trying all the things, all the acupuncture, all the herbs, all the everything. I had been married before, and I was trying to get pregnant, and that was not in the cards for me. And then I got really angry during this time too, because I was like, oh, uterus, the only thing you're making is fibroids. And that's part of the grief process, that anger. So I got really angry and really sad and really all of the things all at once. But it's something that, at that time that is what I had to do. Having said that, building up to that point, there were so many pluses and yeses, learning so much more about energy work, being able to feel that in my own body, using nutrition and everything you mentioned, tons of acupuncture and herbs, and using all of that to great benefit. So all of that's not lost. Sometimes people come, like my clients come, they're like, but I still have them. Yes. And maybe the rest of you has felt that difference. The rest of you is more balanced. Like you are able to access different parts of yourself that maybe you didn't before. There are a number of other things that can be true as well. It's not like one or the other. So for me, this happened in February of 2020. So right before pandemic.
Yeah.
And
Wow. Crazy.
yes, it was crazy timing. Fortunately, I didn't have to be alone in the hospital. I didn't have to be alone during these times. That's a whole other topic we can go into. Even though I wasn't alone, the grief was huge. And I didn't realize it was going to be that huge. Because I was dating somebody at the time too, and he decided this was all too much for him, and he decided to just back away. And so then I was by myself, and so had that experience as well. And during the healing process, my hammock was my best friend. And it was just like being in this hammock. And then I had friends that were like, I'm going to come visit. My parents came and they were able to be here right away, but then nobody could come.
Yeah.
So it was like the first 3 weeks I had somebody with me, my parents, my mom for a while, or my dad first and his wife, and then my mom. And then once they left, everyone else's flights were canceled, and so,
Oh, gosh, yes.
so then I'm like, I'm here by myself. And my local friends were amazing and really stepped up. And thank goodness, I'd have little soups left on my porch and, all kinds of loving interactions.
Yeah.
So during that hammock time, I realized that whole life force energy was just like gone from me.
Oh.
And it also, because I'm a very feeling like physical and emotional connected person, it was my belly button. Because the belly button is the umbilicus, that gives life. And mine, I feel it now. That to me, and one of the cuts was there, there for the surgery. And so I just felt like a real negative connection to that. And so, and right after that, I also got an infection there.
Oh my
And, I know now thinking back about it, it was that overwhelm. And then me also not being able to get through that grief, so it was like a combination of all these things. So I did a lot of healing around that umbilicus. And what that actually meant to me or means to me was huge. During that time, I have a history of Native American drumming being like a part of my being. And it was during that time that I was in physical pain because I had a lot of endometriosis too. So I was like cauterized through a lot of my abdomen, which was unbelievably painful during the healing. It was described to me by the doctors as it's worse than giving birth.
Wow.
So for me, that was like even worse because I'm like, I wanted to give birth, and I never got to do that. This is when I get emotional. So
Bring it, girl.
it's like, but I wanted to give birth. I didn't want this, So it was like kind of bringing all of these things together. And but I could drum. My arms were fine. So I would drum and find this heartbeat and different beats and use the different drums on the parts of my body. So, at that time, I had never heard of sound healing. But, I feel like it was just something that naturally came as part of my healing. And now I do drum circles once a month because I want everyone to know, it's fun. And healing, you can be both and incorporate it all. That is definitely one of the reasons, and I attribute drumming to part of my healing for sure. And that's like the heartbeat of Mother Earth. It's like the being currently present here in this moment and knowing that we are exactly where we need to be, even though we don't want to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before that, I'll just share one more thing.
Yeah.
So leading up to that, the previous 18 months, I led a monthly creative women's circle, and we talked about different topics each month, and we created something around that topic. Usually it was in writing, was either healing something or expressing something or a joy or whatever. And so in my house, I happen to have like all these extra like little 8x10 canvases. And one day I just thought, oh, I'm here. I might as well paint something. So what I actually painted, I've burned it since, but was it was all these words that I was feeling. Discouraged, pain, all of these. And I got them out onto this canvas. And a few days later, I got the canvas out and I put like white around the edges, which was like, but I can see the light as well coming out. So it was like this natural progression. So I wasn't trying to do it. It just kind of started happening. So, and during that time, I thought, well, I wonder if I could paint something else. And so I ended up painting some paintings, which I never knew I could do, for gifts for people that were helping me during that time.
That's amazing.
My tribe, my family, my friend family, you know, that was in Wimberley too, are still, thankfully.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's part of the creativity part that came in.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because it's such a beautiful example of, and we've talked about it in the show a number of times, you know, creativity and healing, how we can actually use creative process to heal ourselves. And it's almost like it came spontaneously for you in that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to make sure we get to Thais. And, you know, I started working with you probably, I don't know, a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago.
I think so.
It seems like longer. It seems like we've known each other forever. But, and I first started working with you. I had a hip injury. And you were recommended by some mutual friends. And I'd been hearing your name forever. And then I finally came to see you, which was wonderful. And, you know, we had you on episode 2 in the very beginning of the podcast. So it's great to have you back. And we talked about kind of creativity and the body and movement. And in our kind of conversations leading up to today, you brought in some really wonderful elements that I think are so important. It's like, how is the body sort of a sacred vehicle? And I really see it that way. Our body is our temple, our sacred vessel. It's, you know, it's our home, and it is the place of creativity. And so I'd love to hear just kind of what's on your mind with respect to this topic and your own journey and your work with clients.
Yes, I started doing the work without almost without knowing what I was doing. You know, that kind of like, people are going to realize that I don't know what I'm doing, because I work in this PT practice, and the owner needed, there was a huge demand for pelvic floor work. Yeah. So she said, I need you to start seeing pelvic floor patients. And I was mortified, right? I was like, no, I don't have the training. It's something so special. I don't want to go there.
And maybe tell us a little bit what that involves, actually.
So pelvic floor work, you do movement, but you also do internal pelvic examination, and then mobilization. You mobilize the soft tissue, the muscles. So involve internal, inside the pelvis. Mostly through the vagina. So I was like, no, I don't want to go there. But then she said, I would train you. Let's do it. And I'm like, okay. So I started doing very uncomfortable, but then I started to see the results. And I was already a physical therapist for a long time. I was already a Feldenkrais practitioner, which is quite powerful in the sense of self and bring people back home. But that added a completely different layer, because it's almost like women will come back to life.
Yeah.
Right. There was a recent patient that she just ended, and she showed me some pictures. She's like, look how beautiful I look. And I'm like, oh, she doesn't care about, the pelvic floor anymore. It was about, she was happy with herself. Right. So,
and maybe feeling at home in her body.
And vibrant and powerful. So I start to wake up for those words like, oh, they get more powerful. And then we start joking, calling the work like, let's wake up the goddess.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
And then, so that was all great. I could see that happening. I could, observe, but I was not still part of the work. I was doing it. I was supporting these women. And then I remember maybe 2-3 years ago, I went to see this very alternative practitioner here in Austin. And I was, he asked me, he's like, what's going on with your reproductive system? And I'm like, nothing. I don't know. It's all fine, all good. He's like, go check. Don't get scared and come back. And of course, I was already freaking out. Oh my gosh, don't get scared. I'm scared.
What is going on?
I'm scared. And then I was diagnosed with a quite big fibroid, completely silent, no bleeding, no anything. And the doctor was very straightforward, like, it's too big, you need to remove your uterus. And I'm like, why not the fibroid? Why to remove the whole uterus? And then she turned to me and said, you don't want to have more kids, do you?
Right. Ugh.
Like, that's the only reason to have a uterus.
Right. Which is such a common question.
So,
That's crazy.
That's right. So I was like, and then here I was, like a reta practitioner with all these tools, sitting in my car and just crying and feeling powerless. Yeah. And I was like, should I do it? Should I not do it? Maybe, well, but I'm like, but what about me? What about my work? What about So I went back to him and he said, he put this empty chair in front of me. He's like, talk to your fibroid. And I'm like, oh, goodness. Hi, fibroid. What are you doing there? What do you have to tell me? And he was just like looking at me, and I'm like, he's like, go ahead. And I'm like, okay, we are doing this. And then he saw, and I come from dancing, so the whole love with movement start early on in life with dancing. So I can perform, right? But then I have to talk myself, don't take that route. It's cheating. Don't go for that, So I was just like feeling, stupid and like, what am I doing? Why do I pay for this? Why do I come to see him every time? And then he said, do you know what a fibroid is? And I'm like an A student. Fibroid is, he's like, no. You know why you grow that? And I'm like, no. And to make you stronger. It's a growth. He said, it's a growth. And I'm like, oh, it says fibroid, extra fiber. So it comes to strength.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, okay. And he said, and you have been doing this because when I was 19, I had a thyroid cancer. Yeah. Another growth. And then he turned to me and he said, isn't time to stop trading organs for power and strength?
Yeah.
And then that was completely, then I went to, he said, tap into your heritage, into your ancestors. I bet you can find a different source of strength. So then that changed completely what I was seeing, right? So I was already work with these women and already seeing the result. And I'm like, there's no other name for it. It's sacred.
Yeah.
It's spiritual, but again, right? It's a PT office. So I feel very shy about going there, but so curious about getting more of that, more of the, and then for me, so like you said before, right? The resistance.
Yeah.
Is hysterectomy my path? Could be, but I feel resistant, and I think it is because I'm not done with it.
Yeah.
I didn't learn yet what I get to learn. So then one thing that he said is that could be related to sexual trauma with your sexuality. And I'm like, I have no trauma with my sexuality. What are you talking about? And then one day hit me, and I was like, oh my gosh, all that I know is abuse. I start to see, because it's the microaggressions in my case. I come from a very sexist, misogynist culture in my house, I could see that happening. My brother, the comments about women, about women's body, the lack of respect. So it's so important for me to go in the other direction, right? Like, yes, you're special, you're sacred, your anatomy is perfect.
Yeah.
You know, my brother would go to details about female and make fun and compare. And I was maybe 14, 15 at the time. So that was really a hit on my sexuality.
Yeah.
That's, you know, seeing a female body be degraded.
Disempowered.
Completely.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, so those are that's my sexuality was developed through those lens.
Right.
Right. So yeah, so this is for me, that's the path. I'm still learning, but digging more into this energy, I don't know if energy, but this meaning.
Yeah.
Right? The female, like this
Yes.
power. Yeah. You know, from a powerful, creative, you know, a way to make things come through.
Yes. Yes. And I'm so glad you said that because, again, bringing it back to creativity and the theme of this podcast, you know, I see creativity as a process of making meaning of our experiences, you know, whether it's through writing or drumming or music or whatever it might be. It's a way that we can reflect on our experiences. And I think for me, the way I was able to, because I was so resistant for so many years, and then it just started to get like worse and worse and worse. And it was like, well, how much do you want to suffer? Right?
Yeah,
but it was
it's a choice.
really hard decision. And then, you know, I was reading a lot of books on the topic, having these conversations, which I'm so glad we're having because I think there's so many women out there that are dealing with these kinds of issues. And, you know, there's not a lot of helpful resources. There are some, but there should be a lot more. And so hopefully this conversation is helpful to other women. But for me, you know, it was a process. I think I grieved it beforehand.
Yeah.
You
I think
know,
you did.
and I had the luxury of, you know, it being intentional and I was in control of the timing and all of that kind of stuff. But, you know, I was reading the book, Women's Bodies, Women's
Awesome
Wisdom, which is so great. And, you know, she
Yeah.
talks about that decision, whether or not to have a hysterectomy. And she doesn't necessarily recommend surgery unless it's an extreme situation. And then she talks about how, well, if you decide you are going to go through with it, how do you prepare yourself for that? You know, and even though both of my parents were physicians, you know, I have some hesitation around the Western medical paradigm that only looks at symptoms and not the whole person. That's what I love about what each of you do. The healing is so much more holistic, right? But she recommended doing some meditations and guided visualizations to prepare for surgery, where you actually envision yourself, you go to a happy place and then you kind of envision yourself in the operating room. And, you know, the doctors are there and the techs are there and everyone's been training their whole lives to do this job and they take pride in what they do and they're here to help you.
So you feel more supported.
And it was a question of trust.
Yeah.
I think because I have a lot of fear around going under anesthesia, around having the surgery, you know, the whole process. And it helped me get my mind in a place to not only be able to like receive the healing, but then to like move through the process. And it was suggested to me by a couple of people, you know, I think yourselves included, and a couple of other people who are quite intuitive who said, you know, instead of just focusing on what you're losing, what could you be gaining? Maybe this is really dragging you down. Maybe your creativity will actually blossom. After this, you'll have more energy. You'll have more space. And so I am sort of conscious of time. And I want to come back to what I was just saying, kind of like show you where I am now. But I don't know. I think this question of how we make meaning, it's not just physical. It's not just a diagnosis. It's not just a growth. There's this whole mental and emotional and spiritual aspect to all of this.
Absolutely.
So I don't know. Anything kind of to share on that?
I think working with you, what I noticed that was a moment that you knew. I don't know how you got there, but I think it's important. I don't know how other women, I don't know how I will get there, but it was quite obvious that there was a moment that you would just, it sounds like you closed that and you knew.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it was precisely through those conversations and seeing people who'd been through it and were well and good.
I remember you even, I showed you my scars, and I know even the look on your face at that moment, because they felt so huge at the time. And they're like, these little things now, And so I remember even that moment and the look in your face like, oh, okay. At least now I can visually see that.
Yes.
And now you see also that I have full life force energy and have had that experience.
Exactly. And I will say just, for anyone who might be contemplating this, the surgery itself has come such a long way. Both my mother and stepmother had hysterectomies, and they cut you open, and it was a huge process, and you were bedridden for weeks. And now they do it often if they can. We both had laparoscopic, so much smaller incisions and ideally much quicker healing time. So it's really incredible what they can do.
Yes. And I think that helps the emotional and spiritual healing part of it, because we are able to see that process physically and notice that physical energy coming back into our body.
Yes.
Where I personally was like, I could only work 3 weeks out of 4 beforehand, and so I was just really sluggish and draining. And so then you are able to feel that come back into your body. I mean, not without, I still was doing as many things. I was walking around my house with acupuncture needles in and, doing all kinds of things, to support myself as much as I could.
But I think that's something that sticks out to me too, is just talking about your life force energy and that creativity. I think I kind of recall your getting more light to your face with this idea that, oh, what if I can surrender to this? This is a part of my path, or letting go of this. How can that open up this new energy, this new creative force?
Yeah.
A new connection to myself, of a new vitality almost.
Yeah.
And I feel like I saw that shift happen.
I know. It was really amazing. And again, I'm grateful to each of you and to all of the medical practitioners that I've interacted with. The surgeon who did my surgery was amazing, Dr. Hallie at the Austin Women's Hospital, Austin area OBGYN. I have to give her props. Like, she was amazing. All women. The anesthesiologist was a woman, and it was just great. So I mean, we could talk about this for so many hours, and maybe we'll have to do a follow-up episode at some point. But I do just want to share kind of where I've ended up with this, which is I am now 7 weeks out from surgery. I have my energy back.
Yeah.
I am working on 3 new songs. I have lots of ideas for the podcast and things to try out and people to talk to. And my creativity is flowing, and it was suggested to me that was a real possibility. In fact, one kind of healer that I spoke with said, take everything that you are ready to let go of on that topic of letting go and put it into your uterus and let the doctors take it away. And there's going to be a huge shift here. And I can feel it. And I think you all described witnessing that.
That makes me think about that question though, kind of coming full circle. It's like, isn't it about having the power, right? The power to be like, this is my choice.
Yes.
I am surrendering.
Absolutely.
I am letting go. And
Yes.
how that can just support you spiritually to get through it.
Absolutely.
As opposed to it like someone else making the choice for you or just kind of.
For sure.
Yeah. I feel like that is.
For sure.
That's being empowered as a woman.
Yeah. And even if we don't necessarily have a choice, you've found a way to connect to your creativity in your own healing process. So we all have our own journey. But I think that sense of empowerment and like, you know, in interacting with medical professionals, like we don't have to be passive. Yeah. I have a very dear friend who's working with pancreatic cancer. And what she has really inspired for me is that you have to advocate for yourself and don't just take what one doctor tells you. Get a second opinion, do your research, ask around, be informed. Like we have to kind of take control of our own healing.
Yes. And that is also, they know what they know.
Yeah.
You know, and we also have this tribe now that we are creating.
Yes.
You know, so yes, use that and the other supports, tools. Yeah. Even, you know, when you talked about like being with your family and all the women like being together. Yes, like that's amazing. You know, but people like, you know, we all came from some kind of tribe somewhere.
Yeah.
And during those times, I think these conversations you saw your family or your people or your tribe going through all the stages of life, you know, and we don't have that now. We all move all over and we have to create that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that's a beautiful kind of note to end on. And you know, Charlotte, my Syncreate business partner, and I are working on a book on creating in community and just recognizing the communities that we all have and how do we create community and support and sustain each other.
Yes.
And healing conversations.
Yes. It helps just to talk about it. Yeah. So cathartic, right? Like, let's have the conversation.
Or, I'm not alone. We're in this together.
Yes.
Always.
Absolutely. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So great. I'm so happy this came together so beautifully. So at the end of each episode, I usually give a creativity pro tip. And what's coming to mind today is, you know, really inviting each of us to contemplate where our creativity lives in our bodies. You know, whether we consider ourselves to be an artist or a creative, or whether we're just now learning that we all have creativity and we use it every single day. So, you know, how do we relate, you know, physically and spiritually to our creativity? So I invite you to kind of contemplate that and see what arises for you. So at Syncreate, we're here to support your creative endeavors. So if you have an idea for a project or an entrepreneurial venture and you're interested in our help, please reach out for one-on-one coaching or join our Syncreate 6-month coaching group in 2024, where we'll be taking people through the creative process from start to finish using our model of play, plan, and produce from our Syncreate book. And just want to say thank you again to our lovely guests today, Leah Shadwick, Marie Commisso, and Thais Bicalho Silva. So happy to have you all here. And we are recording today at Record ATX Studios in Austin.
Yay. Thank you
for this conversation.
Yes, thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Beautiful.